Hi, I'm Drew.
I'm Harley.
I'm Nancy,
And we're
the
the
Bound
Bound
in
in
Book
Book
podcast.
podcast.
You can expect a fun time, some curse words, and a lot of discussion. Our episodes will both feature guests and be conversations between the three of us.
We do intend to stay spoiler-free for the majority of our shows. Our guest episodes will feature a spoiler section towards the end. We're here to be an author, reader, and industry at large safe space to discuss books, opinions, and feelings. But we are going to keep it positive.
We want listeners to know that we are not here to bash your favorite stories or authors, but may discuss things we didn't like too. And we hope you join our discussion over on social media and enjoy the episode. Who wants to go first with spelling their name with tropes and saying a book?
I can go since I have the shortest name.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Okay, I used a little creativity. So my name, if you don't know, my name is Drew. So die if you touch him/her. We were creative. And then my book is Skin of a Sinner by Avina St. Graves. It's a dark romance, so that was an obvious trope. R was Reluctant Allies to Lovers, and my book is the book that I associated with it, Fear the Flames by Olivia Darling. And if you haven't read it yet, she had released it as an indie, but it's currently going to be re-released because she's under new management now, I'm pretty sure. So it'll be re-released, I believe, in sometime this summer. I feel like it's like either the end of August or September.
Well, that's
So
fun.
I'm really excited to read that for the first time and see what changed between the indie version and the traditionally published version. And then E, Enemies to Lovers, of course. The book is Rule of the Aurora King, which is the second book in the Artifacts of Uranos series by Nisha J. Tooley. And then W, Why Choose, of course. I actually just finished reading a Why Choose book, so that's the one I'm choosing, and it's called One Pucked Up Pack by Sarah Blue.
Is it about hockey playing werewolves?
It's okay, so it's like I was telling you guys earlier, it's an Omegaverse book. They're not shifters, so I didn't know I didn't know you could have an Omegaverse without shifters, so they don't shift. They're just humans with like special biological proclivities. And they play hockey. Yeah, so it's a hockey playing Omegaverse. Why choose?
That is such a niche, like. Okay.
Who's next?
I'll go. So my name is Harley. I think a lot of people probably don't know how to tell the difference between our voices yet. You'll get there, friends. You'll get there. So I'm I'm Harley. So H is He Falls First, and I've got Forever Rain by V.B. Lacey, who we just had on. And then I've got A for Arranged Marriage, which is like one of my favorite tropes. And I've got Celestial by H.R. Moore. R is Rescue Mission, and I've got The Curse of Ophelia by Nicole Platonia, and it's one of my most favorite books. And book 2, The Shards of Ophelia, also has a rescue mission subplot. L, I've got Love Triangle, and I've got The Lost God by Sheila Masterson. E, Enemies to Lovers, I've got The Dagger in the Forbidden Air by Amelia J. And my other E is Epic Quest, and I've got A Waltz Through Flames by Jordan Dugdale, which her books are so cool. Have either of you guys read them?
I have not.
I have not either.
Okay,
I will add it
so
to the TBR.
it's a D&D based book. So her and her friends did a campaign with the main characters that are in this book, and so she decided to write the story. And book 3 comes out later this year, and it's so much fun. The Tidings of Misfits is the first book, and then this one is the second one, A Waltz Through Flames. It's so much fun. I love it, and she is just the sweetest, cutest human being.
Ooh, okay. I'm adding it to the TBR. Wait, do you play D&D?
No.
Okay.
I don't
was
know
just curious.
anything. No, I don't know anything about it. And I think in a Facebook group, she was looking for ARC readers for her second book. And I was like, tell me more. And she was like, I'll send you the first one. And I was like, okay. And I read it and I was like, and I read it and I was like, oh my God, I want to be on board with the second one. She's just like the nicest human being, and the books are so fun. And there's no romance in the first two, like no romantic subplots, but the relationships between like our core cast of characters are so tight knit that you really don't miss it.
Oh, I love that.
And I've never once thought that in my entire life because I love romance in my fantasy.
I feel that. I feel that so hard.
Yeah. Nancy, you want to go?
Yeah. All right. So obviously my name is Nancy. So first N, I chose nicknames and I picked The Burns We Carry by Murray Good. I most of the books I have on this list also would fit that. But I do love a good nickname. And then for A, I put Age Gap, which I picked Waiting for Sunshine by Sarah Purtle. Both of those books, by the way, are contemporary romance. I probably should have said that. And then for my other N, I decided to be a little bit creative because I couldn't think of anything else, and I did Enemies to Lovers. And for that, I put The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Still one of my favorite Enemies to Lovers books. And then for C, I did Chosen One, which I put Long Live by V.B. Lacey. And then for Y, I did You're Mine, and I picked Threaded by Tay Rose.
Isn't it so funny that we all had Enemies to Lovers on our names?
It is funny. Like when I picked that, I was just blanking on the fact that y'all both had E's and y'all were both going to pick that, but you know.
I tried so hard to think of another E trope, and my mind was a blank.
Well, when I initially did this, because I pulled my answers from a post that I made a while ago, when I initially did this, I had to I used Google. I had to figure out what's another E trope because I've got two E's in my name.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that.
But I found Epic Quest, and then I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of Epic Quests in the books that I'm reading. That's a good one.
That is a good one. See, if I don't see things in front of my eyes, I don't realize it. I'm like, oh yeah, your name does have two E's in it, doesn't it?
Well, I remember, so I tagged a bunch of people in this post when I made it, and Jenny was like, what do I do? What's a J one? What's a Y? She was trying to figure it out. It was funny. Okay.
I remember a bunch of people were discussing it in Tay's Discord after.
Yeah.
So when I was trying to put this together for today, I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can find that conversation.
Just ripping off other people's ideas, Nancy.
When we were doing it in Tay's Discord, I remember I wasn't thinking of tropes. I was just thinking of MMCs that I liked that fit my name. And then so when you asked me, you're like, oh, let's do this for the podcast. I was like, oh yeah, I did this already. And then I was like, wait, no, I didn't do this already. I just thought of names.
Do you want to share the names? Do you have them
that's
handy?
okay. I don't have it on the top of my head.
Okay, well, perfect. All right, well, hey, you guys, welcome back to the show. Today, if you didn't guess by our little opener game, we are talking about tropes, our favorites, least favorites, etc. And I think when we asked our friends what topic they wanted us to talk about next, this was the easy winner. So let's start with that one because we've already talked about it a little bit. But before we hop in, let's talk about what we're currently reading.
I'm at a loss because I just finished a book. It was the one I brought up, One Pucked Up Pack. I literally just finished it the minute we started recording. But my next read is actually an arc that I have been waiting on bated breath for a very long time now. It's called Pits and Poisons by R. Rayetta. I'm sorry if I butchered her last name. But it's the second book in this duology. It's These Godly Lies is the duology name. And It's about a woman who was granted immortality by eating a peach from a god.
Oh.
And I'll leave it at that, and it's really amazing. If you guys haven't read it yet, her first book is called Peaches and Honey, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm really excited to start that one.
So I have not been reading really as much as I want to. Like, I finally finished Legendary sometime last week, I think, on audio. But I am still making my way through Forever Rain. Part of it is because I don't want it to end. Part of it is just life has been a lot, and so I haven't had the energy to sit and focus on reading. And then the last part of it is when I sit to read, I feel guilty because I'm not writing. And then when I sit to write, I feel guilty because I'm not reading. And so I end up doing neither. So I am in both a reading and writing slump right now just because of everything else that is going on. But I will say I can understand why that chapter that I was on when we recorded with Vanessa is her favorite. I think I'd have to go check how many highlights I made, but I think that's probably a record for how many highlights I made in one chapter.
I wanna ask, but I don't want anyone to get spoiled, so you'll have to tell us off the air.
Okay.
Yes. So I just finished 2 back-to-back arcs that I can't give a ton of information about because they're not out yet, nor will they be out by the time we drop this episode. But the first one is The Godless Kingdom, which is the conclusion to the Lost God series by Sheila Masterson. It was phenomenal. I did a lot of crying. And I wasn't ready for the story to end. And the other one is The Dawn of the Cursed Queen, which is the 3rd book in Amber v. Nicole's Gods and Monsters series. And that one did a lot of crying in that one too. Felt like I was put through a strainer when I finished it.
Oh, geez, you went through
It
an
was,
emotional
yeah.
time then.
I did, and I was like, I stopped the Dawn of the Cursed Queen about halfway so I could read the Godless Kingdom because I knew I was going to fly through the Godless Kingdom, and I did. I finished it in about 24 hours. And I'd already had Dawn of the Cursed Queen for like 4 or 5 days, and I was only about halfway. So I paused it, and I was like, actually, this will be great. I won't have a book hangover. I can just hop back into this other story. And then I was put through a cheese grater by the author. So
That's funny that you say you wouldn't have a book hangover after the Godless Kingdom, because after I finished, I was like, "What do I do?" I'm like, "There's nothing, I can't read anything after this because 'cause I'll just be
well,
comparing it."
so my thought process, and I was correct, at least for me, my thought process was that I'm in the middle of this other story, and I'm really excited about this other story.
That's true.
So I was already invested in the story and the characters, and it's a book 3. It's not like a brand new world, a first book, anything. It's book 3. So I'm already invested in the characters and everything, so I thought that that would be how that goes, and it did help. But now I have other arcs that I have to start that are brand new worlds, and I don't know that I'm ready yet.
Yeah, good luck. That's what I was thinking too. I was like, "I really can't start anything new right now after the Godless Kingdom, because it's just I'm still there. I'm mentally still I am I'm in that world, and I don't know when I'm gonna leave."
I never want to leave.
Truly. So I know a lot of us in the Discord were talking about getting matching tattoos for that series because it means a lot to a lot of us. And I don't know if I'm gonna be able to wait, y'all. Like, you might just see me with the tattoo already because I'm impatient and I need it on my body.
Well, I told Jenny me and her would go together, so I have to wait.
That's
Or until
fair.
she comes to visit.
You just show up on
Yeah.
her doorstep one day.
I have her address. Just showed up. Oh, get in, bitch, we're getting tattoos.
I would love that. You can do that to me anytime.
I
Would
have your
do it.
address too.
Oh, I'll give you my new address when I move.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I forgot you're moving. Well, sometimes on my flights to Reno, I'll get laid over in either Vegas or LA. So I'll pick Vegas so I can come hang out. If I can get like a 2 or 3 hour layover, right? We can get lunch or something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. I'd love that.
Me too. Okay. Let's get the train back on the tracks here.
Yeah, please.
So I know we talked about it a little bit in our intro episode, but let's talk about it a little bit more in depth. What are some of our favorite tropes?
Okay, I have a list. Do you want me to rapid fire?
Yeah, go ahead and rapid fire, and then we'll circle back once we've all named all of our favorites. We'll circle back and see kind of what we've got in common, and we'll talk about them a little bit more.
Okay. I'm definitely missing a few, so I will steal some of your guys' once I hear them, but I have
Great.
He Falls First, Reluctant Allies to Lovers, Forced Proximity, Touch Him or Her and Die. I love like a possessive slash obsessive MMC, FMC relationship. Um, Mates. Mates can either be one of my favorites or least favorite. It really depends how it's done. Found Family, The Chosen One, Arranged Marriage, and fake relationships.
My top three are forced proximity, enemies to lovers, and arranged marriage, and those three often go like hand in hand. But I also love found family. I love fated mates. I love any type of rescue mission, any kind of adversarial relationship to lovers. I adore it. It's so much fun. I love Touch Them and Die. Any variation of Touch Them and Die, and who did that to you? Who did this to you? And any variation of it are my favorite.
So mine are, honestly, I'm just going off the top of my head. Mine are Found Family is my number one favorite. Enemies to Lovers or Rivals to Lovers, anything like that. Forced Proximity, trying to think. Definitely He Falls First, and the like Touch Them and Die, and the Who Did This to You. All those moments will always get me.
I love a who did this to you moment.
Me too. Also, are we counting My Wife as a trope?
Sure.
Because that one's definitely one for me. And I
I
just had
would
another one, but
I would argue that the my wife thing is more of a micro trope, which we're gonna talk about also. That was something that Jamie specifically asked if we would talk about when we do this episode. So we'll talk a little bit more about microtropes in a few minutes.
cool. Also, I mentioned nicknames earlier. I love nicknames, especially if it starts off as kind of a antagonistic's not the word, but kind of as that word works because I can't think of what I'm thinking of, but like in threaded, how with that nickname, I'm trying to be vague for spoilers, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like that kind of use of a nickname, and then when it turns into a more romantic nickname.
I actually love that too. And my most favorite version of that is Princess. Princess, Little Princess, anything like that. Does it stem from someone calling me that for a long time? Perhaps. But it's in a handful of my favorite books with my favorite book boyfriends, and it's just so fun. It's my favorite.
A really good one. One of my favorites for that is Love. Like that one might be considered overused, but like it works so well for it to be a more casual type of thing before they actually become a couple. And I might be biased because I'm using that one in my book, but that dynamic, but I definitely really like that one too.
I do like the nickname trope. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now. Um, I I like love, but also, like, my ex-boyfriend used to call me that, so I do get a little bit of, like, a chill when I hear it. I'm like, "Oh god. Okay, that's okay."
That makes sense.
Like, the PTSD sets in.
It was so princess. I wasn't called that by a significant other. I was called that by their family in like in an affectionate way, not like in a what a princess. It was like in a like a very like affectionate kind way. So I don't know. I'm like, oh yeah, that was actually like a happy time most of that for me. So
I like the
Cute.
more, like, um, original nicknames, like, where it's something super specific to that character, and in any other context, it'd be like, "This is kinda cringy," but because of everything we know about the story so far, it just fits really well.
like Fireheart,
Oh my
perhaps.
god, yes. Okay, yes. Like Fireheart. Thank you. Thank you for being my brain cell today, Harley.
It's okay. Oh my god, where's the we just need
Who
the cute
has
little
it?
brain cell
Who
emoji.
has the brain
Me.
cell? It's not
Me,
me.
because I typed up a script so that way I would be able to use the half brain cell that I've got left.
I'm glad someone has it.
Um, yeah, one of
Okay.
us.
What else? You guys, I think you guys also said we all said found family.
Yes.
I feel like that's an easy trope to love. I mean, our little Discord family is basically a found family, so I can see why we all relate to that one.
It is actually you wanna know the stupidest shit that happened that happened after I finished my 2 back-to-back arcs yesterday?
Yes.
So I'm sitting there staring at the wall because that's what you do when you finish a good book. And I just start fucking crying because because I'm, like, so happy and so grateful that I've got this, like, little found family, like, I could just jump into Discord and, like, tell you guys I'm having a shitty day, and everyone will be like, "Oh, here's a hug. Oh, here's a smack on the ass. Who do I need to beat up?" Like, stuff like that, and I'm like, "Oh, these are, like, my real friends." You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. No, I feel the same way. Like you guys are the people that I want to go to tell things, and I'm like, I have not met like 99% of you in person, but I want to tell you guys everything.
Fully the same way.
Yeah, I think I've only met one person from Discord in person, so,
Bessie.
yeah. Oh my god, it's gonna be so embarrassing if I've met somebody else and I forgot.
They're gonna message you. No,
I haven't met anyone from Discord yet, so
yet,
but
yet.
one day. Yet.
Next
Um
month, I'm meeting Tay in
Oh,
person.
where are you going to? Does she have
wait,
an
for
event,
what?
or are you just gonna hang out?
I'm going to well, I'm technically going to shoot headshots for her. Um, a while ago, I told all the authors if they ever wanted, new author headshots, just pay for my plane ticket and I'll come shoot them. I won't charge them for the shoot. I'll just come if they pay for my plane ticket and if I can't stay with them, lodging. And they was like, "Do you want to come do some
It's
pics?" And I
awesome.
was like, "Yeah. When are we pick a day, pick a weekend, I'll come." So it's over the same, yeah, it's over the same weekend as UtopiaCon, which Bessie will be at, so she will also be there.
Oh my god, cute.
So cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. And Amanda lives there too. Um,
Oh, I did not know. I don't know
yeah.
where anyone lives. All I know is like they're on the East Coast, and like I don't have any business knowing what states are on the East Coast.
um, yeah, so Amanda and Tay both live in Nashville. And then I know I'm such a fucking creep, guys. I know where like roughly where everybody lives because I'll ask because I want to be, considerate of time zones and all that, and then it'll just stick in my brain. The only one I can't remember is Kara, but I'm pretty sure she's in South Carolina. Well, let's talk about our least. Wait, are we done with favorite tropes, or do we want to talk about them a little bit more?
I don't really have anything I need to say more.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So let's talk about our least favorite tropes. And one of our friends actually had another fun game idea for us to play when we do this, and it's saying our least favorite trope, and the other two people have to try to convince you that it's actually a positive, fun trope.
Okay, you go first.
Me?
Yeah. What's your least favorite trope?
Surprise pregnancy is my least favorite. On purpose and like expected or trying, and someone gets pregnant, that's totally fine. It's very specifically the surprise.
I want to say something that's such a huge spoiler, and then you should know by what I'm saying right now what I'm referring to.
Okay.
I'm channeling, but okay. Otherwise, in Akatar, Aka SF spoilers, I feel like that's a surprise pregnancy just because throughout the book it's really set up where Fae don't easily get pregnant. Like, I know that we all have talked about our suspicions for why she was able to get pregnant so quickly, but, like, as you're reading it, we're already, like, we have that knowledge where it's like, okay, it's really hard for Faye to get pregnant, like, it could take centuries for them to finally have a child, so I feel like that was, like, a surprise pregnancy that was a positive, because it was a surprise in the sense of, like, we weren't expecting it as readers, like, we know that they had decided that they wanted to start, trying to conceive, but
Yeah, but they were actively trying. So to me, like I'm talking about like the Breaking Dawn style pregnancy. Like that was out of nowhere. She wasn't interested, didn't want it. That's the type of pregnancy that I'm like very disinterested in having.
oh, yeah, I can't fight against that because I
I
agree.
I can't think of any like rebuttal.
I think we all hate that trope.
I think
I
you're right.
I can't think of an example where it like works, like where it's an unexpected pregnancy that doesn't feel like it's only there because the author like wanted to add some extra drama.
Yeah. I've got two others, well, one and a half others listed, so maybe you guys can convince me on one of these other ones. I said romantic betrayal and cheating. Like cheating is obviously like a very specific kind of romantic betrayal, but I don't like any type of like betraying your romantic partner. Like the longer that I'm in a long-term relationship, that's like the grossest thing I can imagine.
For cheating, that was actually one of the ones I was thinking about saying. For like romantic betrayal, like in fantasy specifically, and excluding cheating, there are ones where I have to be really vague, or else I'll give like massive spoilers for some books.
What is the book? Say the book first.
Well, if I say the book, then it's a spoiler.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good
Oh.
point. I didn't think
Because
about
Well,
that.
then you know that there's a betrayal. And I'm pretty sure you haven't read this book yet, Harley, and I know you wanted to, so I'm not gonna say it.
Okay, then maybe don't. Wait, what book do I need to not read because there's cheating in it, Nancy?
No, I'm not talking about cheating.
Oh,
I'm talking about the other, romantic betrayals.
I think it's a lot easier to stomach romantic betrayal when it's like a fated mates situation. So like
Yeah.
again, since we've already talked about ACOTAR, we've already spoiled the 5th book in ACOTAR. Let's talk about the 2nd book. We see like Feyre lying and going behind Tamlin's back for Rhys, or in Akawar specifically, we see her pretending to be his romantic partner to get back at him when we know that she's actually like mates with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's a time where it makes sense.
Yeah.
But again, in fantasy, you have these like bigger, more fantastic circumstances that like make it make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think for cheating specifically, um, just vaguely, it's if it's the situation is like the person is trying to self-sabotage their great relationship and that's why they cheat, it's like you said, it's easier to stomach. Like, I still hate it, I really don't like it, but when it's something that feels so human in that way where you're like, oh, like, you can tell, like, they don't want to step out of their relationship and cheat, but it's like they're just self-sabotaging. It's, it helps to add depth to the relationship in the storyline.
You wanna know there's a cheating storyline that I remember watching it. It was on a TV show when I was a teenager, and I had, like, an actual visceral reaction, like, almost threw up watching
Oh my
it.
god, what was it?
It was do you guys care about me spoiling a, like, 10-year-old teen
No,
drama?
no.
So in Switched at Birth,
Oh my god,
in
yes.
it's Emmett when he cheats on Bay at, like, the basketball they're, like, away for a basketball game or something like that, and he sleeps with somebody else. And I remember watching that, like, when it was on the air originally, and I was like, "No, like, surely he's not going to," and then I was like, "Oh, he did." And I remember, like, feeling, like, sick to my stomach watching that.
I remember that show, and I don't remember that scene, but yeah, it's like when it's something like that where it's like, I don't know, it's just like someone being selfish, I mean, I guess in all cheating situations, it's someone being selfish. It's just, like, disgusting.
Yeah. What are your least favorites? Drew, how can we convince you?
I think my number 1 least favorite trope is a miscommunication trope, and, like, very specifically when it's something that could have been resolved within, like, 2 sentences said to each other. Like, it's not, like, a large miscommunication where it's like, okay, like, it makes sense, it adds to the plot, like, it's whatever. It's like it's just like it just feels like I hate the ones where it feels like it's just there to cause conflict, and it didn't need to be there. Like, if we had just sent a couple texts back and forth to each other, if we had had one face-to-face conversation, this could have been resolved.
There's a Romeo and Juliet retelling that I read pretty recently, and there's a really well done miscommunication trope. Like, it's established pretty early on that cell phone service is kind of spotty, so but that's brought up, like, the very first chapter, and then we'd never talk about it again. And then in the third act breakup that we have, um, they're trying to we see from both point of views. So they're trying to text each other, but neither one is responding. And we, the readers, can put it together because we know
Mhm.
that they're trying to text each other, but, like, they're not going through. And it isn't until they run into each other, like, face to face in, like, the rainstorm and someone's been kidnapped and it's really dire circumstances. And then they're like, well, I was trying to let you know, and I was trying to let you know. And then you're like, oh, the phone service, right.
Okay, okay.
That one was fun.
See, that I'm okay with. I feel like if it's explained in that way, like, where there's there's some logical reason why they can't communicate,
Yeah.
it's okay. It's when it's, like, something so stupid, like, she just needed to tell him, "I don't like when you touch my leg that way," or something, like, something dumb like that.
I just thought of one. Are you guys both caught up on Crescent City?
Yes.
No.
Okay, never mind.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Nancy. I don't know if it's a spoiler to tell you that our two main characters in a Sarah J. Maas book have trouble communicating.
Not really.
I won't go any further than that, but
Yeah, I definitely I've definitely seen some instances in books where like afterwards I'm like, okay, I guess technically that was miscommunication, but it didn't like put me off of the book because it made sense logically and it wasn't just the characters being immature. Like if it's they're not communicating just because they're acting like children, then I'm annoyed and I'm shouting at the book for them to just talk to each other.
Mhm.
I've got one. And I know you enjoyed it.
Okay.
In The Shards of Ophelia.
I knew it. I knew you were gonna say that.
Is that
Not that
because I
one
talked
yet.
about it before?
Yeah.
So you said you haven't read it yet?
I haven't read that yet.
I thought you did. Okay.
No.
Well, I won't go any further than that. Look, as soon as you get to like halfway through the first book, you're gonna feel where the miscommunication is. But Nicole does such a masterful job of portraying a relationship that has had a lot of miscommunication and two characters that care very, very deeply for each other and are trying to figure it out, but they're just not on the same wavelength. I was gonna say I think that's the best like spoiler free way to explain the way that she does miscommunication.
What's your least favorite trope, Nancy?
Well, you guys took mine.
Oh,
Oh, perfect.
good. Then you have to choose another one.
I was already like, okay, I'm not gonna do cheating because Harley already did that. Miscommunication is my other like really big one. I genuinely don't know if I can think of another one because like there's tropes that I like and tropes that I'm kind of, I guess, meh on. But like those two are really the big ones that'll like turn me off from a book, if like, especially if it's one that like if it's being marketed to me with those tropes. If I start reading the book and and I find out that it's there, but I was enjoying the book before finding out that, then I'll probably keep going. I don't know if I have another least favorite trope.
Do you need help? I have some more.
Okay.
Yeah, Drew, tell us some more of your least favorite tropes.
I was like, do you need help being a hater? Because I can help. Okay, so all of my least favorite tropes, I could convince myself of a time when I didn't hate it, but this one I really dislike. It's refusing the call. So, like, when the main character is the chosen one and they're refusing their power or, like, just refusing to follow through with whatever the prophecy is or whatever, like, I don't like it when it's really drawn out. It can be done well, and it doesn't piss me off all the time, but every once in a while, it's, like, 3 books later, and I'm like, "Okay, we get it. Just just do the thing. You're the guy. You got the power. Just do it. You're so lucky. I'll trade places. I'll do it."
Can you give an example? Because I can't think of anywhere that's like, or if you've got a movie or something like that that's like really
So,
not a spoiler for anybody.
I don't wanna I love this series that I'm gonna mention. Um, this trope just, like, it is, like, hard for me sometimes, like, I just get a little frustrated, but that doesn't make me dislike any series, like, any less. Like, the series is in my top 5, so I just wanna make that very, very clear. Um oh god, is this a spoiler? Have you guys,
You really now back yourself into a corner because you're like, "Oh, if I say it, then it's a spoiler." I know I don't particularly care. I don't care if you say it, even if I haven't read it.
I know you've read it. It's a Coven book.
Oh. Oh.
So I know Nancy may not have read it. I know Nancy hasn't read it because I know which Coven books you've read, Nancy.
Yeah, I've read Tay's and Vanessa's.
It's one of the Coven books. I feel like in a lot of YA books, that's a more common trope.
Would you say it's present in Harry Potter?
Mm, maybe a little bit. It's
Oh,
been so long since I've read Harry Potter, honestly.
you know what? The Hunger Games in Mockingjay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
I would say that that's a good, relatively spoiler-free example because those movies came out, I think maybe 10 years ago. The first one came out, so I feel like that's a relatively safe example to give.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I agree. I would say that's a good example. Maybe even Divergent a little bit. Uh,
N-
mm,
okay, Nancy, have you read Divergent or seen the movies?
I haven't, but I don't really plan to. So
What the fuck? I didn't know until the other day. I was hopping around on Threads. I didn't know that Triss dies.
So that's when I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm done with this series.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And I was scrolling through Threads and someone mentioned, oh, like in an epic, a dystopian YA series, we got to the last book, our FMC died, and then I threw the books away because I was so mad. And then I was like, what the fuck is that about? Like, I was like trying to figure out what it was about. And then I saw Holly. Fucking Holly. No, just kidding. I love her. But I saw Holly had reposted it or had quoted it or whatever and mentioned Divergent. And I like commented on it. Also, I was like, is this how I find out that Triss dies? And she goes, maybe.
Did they wait, I feel like they also when they were doing the movies, they didn't do all the books, like, they stopped after, like, the second book or something.
Yeah, so I think we got 3 Divergent movies, and I think the third one did so badly that they just didn't greenlight a 4th one.
And for sure they would've been like, "Oh, yeah, if we kill the main character in a movie, people are gonna riot," because it's like, the readers already hated it. The
I
movie
didn't.
watchers are gonna hate it.
Yeah, so I didn't ever read those books. Oh my god, I actually just bought all the Maze Runner books to read. I'm really excited.
Ooh, I wanna read that one too. I have been wanting to for a long time now.
Do I know when I'm gonna get to it? Fuck no, I don't.
As it goes, as it goes.
Yeah,
Do you guys have
little
any
hot in my own
more
library.
tropes you dislike?
No?
I'm done.
Oh, cool, okay.
Okay, let's let's talk about microtropes a little bit. Let's shift back a little more into the positive headspace. So before we talk about our favorites, I thought I'd clarify what I think a microtrope is because that way we can make sure we're all kind of on the same page of what we're talking about. So to me, it's one of the moments in the story. Like it's not something that has a plot line. So like enemies to lovers is a plot line throughout the stories, but like a microtrope for an enemies to lovers trope would be like when he holds his dagger to her throat and threatens to kill her, something like that, where it's the moment in the story and it's something that we typically will see repeated over and over and over again within that genre or subgenre.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? I have mine written
Oh.
down, so I'll yell about it if you're ready.
I have okay, my number one top favorite is when the main male character or when any love interest washes their hair. Like, I love when it's like I
Really?
love the hair washing, I love a hair brushing moment. I love doing when they do their hair for them, but, like, specifically, one of my favorites is, like, okay, something traumatic just happened, they put them in the bath and they, like, wash their hair for them. I'm just like, "Ugh, someone please do that for me."
You know who loves to give us those moments? I'm gonna talk about we're talking about fantasy, so we're gonna talk about Sarah J. Maas again. She loves to give us a hair washing moment.
Yes, and I love her for it, and I appreciate it every time.
Yeah. So mine is oddly specific. It is the grabbing around the waist, covering of the mouth, maybe pushing against a wall where it's like you're gonna get us caught.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, there is one of those moments in is since we're talking about microtropes, is it really a spoiler to say the name of the book since it's just a very brief moment in a book?
I don't
I
think
wouldn't say it's
so.
a spoiler.
Okay, I was gonna say there's a moment in Illuminance where that happens by Kara Douglas, and it made me kick my feet. I was so excited. I screamed. It was a moment.
That's a hot one. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Nancy?
I'm trying to think of like a top favorite.
I've got another favorite if you need a second.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay. My other favorite is when someone says something along the lines of, okay, like keep me safe.
That's a really
Or
good one too.
yeah, something like that. And we get a few of those moments in some of the Coven books. We get them. It's really popular, I think, a fantasy microtrope to see like, oh, keep me safe, or I'll always keep you safe, or something like those are the words that are said, and it's just like
Yeah.
always a very precious, tender moment between two people.
That's a cute one.
And it always makes me think of the meme that's like, be safe. You be safe. I'll be so safe. And every time I read that, like I love those moments, like they're tender, they're sweet, and then I'll hear that audio playing in my head.
You just ruin it for yourself a little bit with a meme.
Yeah, I think it really heightens the enjoyment for me
okay.
personally,
Okay.
honestly.
That does make it sound very entertaining. All right, so I think I'm gonna do 2 since one of the ones I mentioned earlier belonged here. So the my wife lines are ones that just whatever context they use that phrase, honestly, like that always gets me, but the like where's my wife lines get me as well. I intentionally used that in my book, and that I was physically unwell writing that for a bit after I wrote that scene. I can't decide if that is a spoiler or not, but it's out of context, so I think it's
your
not.
book, Nancy. It's your
It's
world.
my
We're
book.
living in
I
it.
I should know if it's a spoiler or not since it's my book. But
There's one of those moments in Celestial, which is a book that I mentioned earlier, and the whole premise of the book is an arranged marriage, so it's not a spoiler that our main characters are supposed to get married. And a person makes a comment like that, and they're like, "What did you do to my wife?" And I was like, "Ugh, hot."
In the context of an arranged marriage too, it just scratches that itch, just something about it. It's like, oh yes, like we know that that's their wife, but it's just so hot. I don't know why.
oh, like ballroom scenes would be a microtrope, wouldn't it?
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's like somewhere in between like a trope and a microtrope. Like I
Yeah,
think
because
that's
it's like a full scene, but it's not necessarily a plot. Like obviously it furthers the plot, but it's so
we get anyone else who's a fan of that. I think like in every single Coven book series, we get a ballroom scene. Not in Dagger. We don't have one in Dagger.
I was gonna say Dagger
Yet.
hasn't given us one yet.
I
still-
am
yeah.
as a trilogy, there's only one more book. We're gonna get one. I'm holding out hope. I'm begging. Em, if you're listening, I'm begging.
I mean, I think that someone's gonna become the queen, and so when that happens, there has to be a ballroom scene.
Yeah. I'm hopeful. Any others you wanted to discuss?
I mean, classic one horse, one bed.
Mm,
We love.
that's a really good
God.
one too.
I forgot to tell you guys, as a horse girly, I don't love a one horse. Look,
Oh my god, tell us.
I
Tell us the
understand.
tea.
Okay. So I understand the premise. Very hot. Okay. I do. There is not enough space on your standard size horse to make 2 adult sized people sitting on this fucking horse comfortable. Like, are you riding in a big fat fucking saddle? Because listen, my ass is not fitting in a saddle with a grown man's ass. It's not. Someone has to ride behind the saddle. Or you're riding in a massive 2-person saddle, which I don't even know if those exist in our world, but I'm sure they do. You're riding in a massive 2-person saddle, and it can't be a surprise then when you end up on one horse. It's plain from the get-go.
That makes a lot of sense logically, but I will just continue ignoring that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna live
Look.
in Delulu as long as I
Yeah,
can.
I have I wrote one of those scenes, and there's a little like thing that happens, and I was trying to figure out logically how it works, and I think I asked Scott, I was like, does this make sense? And he was like, no, there's no way for you to make that work, like physically make that work. I'm like, I'm going with it anyway.
Here's the deal. I think in a fantasy series, I'm much more likely to just enjoy it because it can be explained away. There's fucking magic. So of course you can comfortably be on a horse with somebody.
That's true.
The other alternative that I've really loved in fantasy books is it's not actually a horse, it's a creature. So and there is a creature in Penn's books, and this isn't a spoiler, she's introduced in very, very early on. She's a Gryvern. So she's a griffin wyvern, so she is huge.
Mhm.
If you're telling me that like 5 people are fitting on that animal, I'm going to believe you. So it's no surprise if there's 2 people on the animal. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and same with like the dragons in Fourth Wing. If you're telling me that Xaden can comfortably fit another person on his dragon's back, okay, I'm going to believe you.
Yeah. No, that makes
You
sense.
could fit probably like 10 people on his dragon.
Yeah. So, or in Nicole's books, all of our main characters have horses that are they're magical horses. So if we get a 1 horse scene in Nicole's books, okay, well they're fucking magic horses. 2 people can fit. That's fine. 2 people can fit on them.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So in media where there's magic involved, I'm much more likely to just say, you know what, that actually makes complete sense in context because there's magic.
Yeah.
I'll just keep telling myself that.
Yeah, you can. That's fine.
Yeah,
I've
just
never-
explain it away with magic.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever read a non-fantasy book that had a 1 horse trope either, so
It is very prevalent in your like cowboy romance.
that makes sense.
Does make
Which
sense.
Which
is
also doesn't
not-
make sense if you are writing a cowboy romance, you'd think they would do their research.
I would hope so.
It only makes a little bit of sense in those like maybe they're not in a saddle. I don't know, but that's where I see it the most outside of fantasy. I do see it pretty often in fantasy, but outside of fantasy, that's where I see it.
Okay, that makes sense. Another microtrope I really like is like when the main characters are they're both warriors of some sort, and one of them is like they're whatever fighting or whatever, and one of them says like, "I love the way my sword looks on you," or like, "My dagger looks good in your hands," or something. It's
Yes.
like, oh yes, I like that a lot.
It's fun.
I'm definitely thinking of Nicole's series.
She just loves to give us that trope over and over again, and we eat it up every fucking time.
Oh yeah, she could give it to me in every chapter, and I'd be like,
It could be.
perfect.
I'm trying to think of who else does that, and maybe Penn, maybe I don't know. That's all I got for microtropes.
Wait, I got another one.
Okay.
A library scene.
Mm.
Like,
Oh, I'm a slut for a library scene.
Yeah.
anything sexual happening in a library at all.
Yeah, I'm blushing, thank you. There's been 3 library scenes that I can think of where I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. And none of them were threaded.
What?
That was the least shocking I can think of the library scenes that
okay.
I've read.
I see what you're saying.
I knew that one was coming, so that's why it didn't shock me. I still thoroughly enjoyed that scene, but
yes. I loved it, but there's one in the 3rd book of another series that every time I think about it, I just turn beet red.
What's the series?
And I can't tell you because it's a major spoiler.
We just
You've
know,
read it.
we just
Nancy.
know
You've
fucking the library. Oh, okay.
You've read it, Nancy hasn't. Actually,
Yes.
there's another series where it's also in the 3rd book towards the end, and there's a very specific line that lives written free in my head. And I can tell you the line because it doesn't use names. And the line is something along the lines of, oh, they'd stumble in and seen so-and-so halfway down my throat.
Ooh. Yes.
And I was like, oh, that was not a flashback I was prepared for in this moment. Y'all are just eating breakfast. And then there's another one where 2 characters are about to get it on, and 3rd character, who has a crush on one of those 2 characters, walks in and is like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, nothing! Like, it's good. It's fun. Do you guys have any others?
I can't think of any right
Okay.
now.
So we can always circle back to it if we want, but let's talk about some of the big tropes inside of our mutual preferred genre, which is fantasy. There's two that I have written down, but there's a third one also that I think we should discuss. The first one, I'm gonna have some hot takes about the first one, but it's morally gray main characters, either male or female. And a lot of people talk about this one and they're like, yes, my main male character is morally gray, blah, blah, blah. But then he's not. He's a good guy that likes to wear black. And I'm going to give big examples from two very popular books that are spoilers for ACOTAR and Fourth Wing. You guys have both read those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I saw Iron Flame on Nancy's Goodreads as something she's read, so I'm assuming she's read the first one too.
I have no. I
You'd
only
be so
read
confused.
the second one. I skipped the first one.
Okay, so the big examples are Rhys from ACOTAR, especially once they're no longer under the mountain, and Xaden from Fourth Wing. He just fucking likes to wear a lot of black, and he's doing everything for. No, listen, he's doing everything for what he thinks is the greater good. Like, he's keeping secrets, he's sneaking around, he's lying to Violet because he thinks he's doing what's right for his people. And Rhys does the exact same thing. He keeps secrets, sneaks around, harms Farah physically, like he breaks her arm. All in the name of keeping his people safe. And I'm going to argue that they are doing what's more or less morally right. And I will say Rhys Under the Mountain, I think, is actually the most morally gray we see him. But as soon as they're like in Valaris, he's not morally gray anymore. He's like a little cinnamon roll.
And
with some tattoos.
The thing about Rhys Under the Mountain is he was playing a part. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you where it's like, okay, that's not really his character.
Yeah.
He was playing a character at that point.
I will say, I think there's shades of morally gray. Like but the thing with that is no one's like 100% pure, like, 100% good. So by that standard, everyone technically is morally gray in a way. So I definitely get what you're saying.
Here's the way that I think of it is if the character is doing things in service of themselves above others, that makes them darker gray, edging towards black or evil, right? Them or, their mate, their child, even those are selfish needs. The people who are doing things in service of the greater good, their people, their country, often at a disservice to themselves, those are not really morally gray. Like, that's a lot closer to white.
Yeah, I can see that. But also, like, with a lot of morally gray characters, like, your kind of anti-hero type of characters, they're doing things because it benefits, their end goal, whether it's, somewhat selfishly driven or it is a bit more selfless, even if it's, like, objectively, like, you're killing people. So objectively, that would be considered morally gray, even if they have a good reason for it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so yeah, I suppose if I go by the way you're considering it, then yes. If I go by the way that I'm considering it, then no. But that's actually, it's super interesting that we don't even necessarily agree on exactly what morally gray means. That's super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's hard to it's hard to put it in such as like specific box, especially because everyone also has different morals. Like, there's obviously major things that we'd all objectively agree are wrong, but like there's some things that we would differ on, and so it's like, and that can also play a part in like the different fantasy worlds that we're reading about. Like, even if us in the real world would think, oh, this is wrong. Maybe it's not so bad in, you know, the fantasy world we're reading about. But they're definitely, I do feel like there's a lot of, like, Xaden and Reese definitely are like, okay, they're just dudes who like to
I think
wear black.
there's examples of immoral behavior, but I don't necessarily think that makes them morally gray characters. And like taking out of the idea that like technically everyone lives in the gray, like if we're like looking at big picture, we're like, oh yeah, this person leans much more towards good. They just have a few selfish moments, but like they tend to be doing things for the greater good, rather than they tend to be doing things in service of themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would say, like, since we used Reese and Xaden as examples, I would say that they fall more in the, like, misunderstood male main character category. Because, you know, before we really get to know them, it's like, oh yeah, they're this awful person who does all these terrible things. And then we get to know them, it's like, okay. And, like, you know, with Reese and Valaris, it's like, okay, he had a, you know, reason for doing what he did. He's protecting his home. Like, that makes sense.
Drew, did you have any thoughts to contribute?
I was just listening to you guys. Know that I agree with both of you. I mean, it is kind of like a weird line to draw where it's like, when does it become morally gray? If you look at it the way that Nancy was looking at it, where it's like we're all technically in a moral gray area, but I feel like how I see it in my mind, it's like how people classify porn. It's like I know it when I see it. That's how I feel about a morally gray character. It's like I'll know when they show up. But
Do you have any examples of someone who you think is like truly morally gray?
I think this subgenre of fantasy, I think, is pretty unique. You've read this book, Harley, the villain's assistant, or assistant to the villain.
Oh, sent to the villain,
Yeah,
yes.
assistant to the villain. I think the villain is morally gray. Like, if you really look at his intentions and what he's striving towards, like, he really just does have, at the core of it, it's like selfish purposes. Like, he's kind of doing it all for himself. Like, he doesn't necessarily care about the greater good. It's such like a rom-com though. It's like I feel like you don't see that.
It is so funny. So we read that for a book club that I'm a part of, and wasn't sure if it was a fantasy book, and I'm going to qualify by saying it is not a fantasy book. It takes place in a fantasy world, but there's not a lot of magic in the book. Like, the magic does not play a main role in the book. So, like, it's a rom-com set in a fantasy world. That being said, it is one of the funniest books that I've read last year. It is so funny.
Good. It's so hilarious. I would argue that it is fantasy. I think she has some plans for the future. Like, I could see ways that she was setting up the magic aspects to show up a little bit. Like, towards the end of the book, I feel like we got a little bit more of a touch of, like, magic in that world. I feel like she touch upon it more later on in the series.
I will be the first to change my opinion if the magic takes a bigger role. I just think if you go into that book expecting it to be a fantasy book, I think you might be disappointed.
That's true. You have to, like, it's like light. It's very like middle grade fantasy at most. At most. It's much more rom-com vibes though, like just in another world somewhere.
I would say the Book of Asriel has a true morally gray character, and it's a female morally gray character.
Okay.
Like, everything that she does is in service to herself and the people that she cares about the most. It's not in service to the greater good. And it is so interesting to see a female character portrayed that way, and Amber does a really, really good job. It's really fun. But I don't see a lot of female main characters that are morally gray in the way that Diana is.
I haven't read the Book of Azrael, but have you read Daughter of No Worlds?
Not yet. It's on the list.
I would say she's leaning the female main character is leaning towards Morley Gray. Because her motivations are I don't know, I guess I don't really wanna spoil it too much, but it's you'll see when you read it, her motivations are towards herself and, like, her group that she's designated. It's not towards, like, the kingdom at large or, like it's not for everyone's well-being, that's for sure.
The other really popular example, and Nancy, I know you haven't read the books, but this is absolutely not a spoiler about this character, but Manon from the Throne of Glass
Oh,
series.
yes. Yeah. I can see that.
Her character arc is really, really interesting, but when we first meet her, she does not give a fuck about anything besides herself and her core group of people, and everything that she does is in service to make sure that they stay alive. She also just, like, kinda likes to kill people for fun, but a lot of it is to make sure that she and her core group of people stay alive. Nancy, do you have any morally gray main characters you wanna talk about?
Well, on the topic of, since we're talking about morally gray female main characters, I think one of my favorites is definitely Jude.
Yes.
Which, like, Jude Duarte, the Cruel Prince. I probably should have said the full title when I said that. But she's definitely like the way she's written. If someone told me about the book before I'd read it, I would probably have thought I wouldn't like her. But like she's just I don't even know how to explain it, but yeah, she's very like, you know, her iconic line, "If I can't be better than them, then I'll become so much worse." Like,
That's such a vibe.
I think Polly Black
Yeah.
specifically does a really good job of writing really, really unlikable female characters and making you just adore the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Because I never read the Spiderweb Chronicles, so I can't really speak to that. But her other book, The Book of Night, the main character in that is incredibly unlikable. She's kind of a piece of shit, honestly. But but you spend so much time in her world and in her head, you're like, oh, I actually really, really like her. In a very similar way, when you like think about Jude, she's really rough around the edges, and like as someone who felt very left out and didn't feel like they belonged where they grew up, I connected with that particular aspect of her character. But she's a fucking brat. We can talk about The Chosen One, because I think The Chosen One is the biggest trope in the fantasy genre, and I think every single fantasy story I've read or fantasy subgenre story that I've read has either a chosen one, a chosen pair, chosen family. Like there is a chosen person plotline.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to see that in a fantasy. I'm trying to think of literally one that does not have one, and it's so hard right now.
I would argue that there's certain books in certain series where you don't know yet that somebody is gonna take on that role. Like Nancy said, like, oh, that was a major spoiler, so never mind.
Was it? It's The Cruel Prince. I haven't read that one yet. Is she chosen? Did she get chosen?
Not in the way that you're thinking.
I would say that one kind of doesn't. I don't think that one really has the chosen.
I'm gonna argue that we get a little bit of it in the last book, and there's a specific subplot that happens in the last book between her and a creature that she is the only one who can.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, she's the only one who can resolve that problem. So that's where I would think that it comes in there.
Yeah, I guess I guess like I see what you're saying now. Like when you said like you never read really any that has some sort of that doesn't have the chosen one thing, I was a little bit skeptical, but like thinking about it that way, I can see how like every fantasy book would have something like that, or series would have something like that. That makes more sense.
Yeah,
now.
and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a big
The overarching
a plot through the whole entire series, like the way that Harry Potter is, for example, because it's pretty clear from
right
the very second chapter, the very first book, it's going to be a chosen one, Jesus reborn situation, right? If you consider Twilight, I suppose, but even then, maybe even then, Breaking Dawn kind of, yeah.
Twilight's its
Anyways,
own mess of a book.
Twilight is actually a paranormal romance.
Oh, you're right. It's not even fantasy. You're so right.
It's not even very specifically. Breaking Dawn is a fantasy book, but everything else is paranormal romance.
I'm like, because it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like in book one, maybe they're not the chosen one, but then normally once you start going further in the series, it's like, oh, okay, like it happens. Like it happens at some point throughout. I'm really drawing a blank on literally any book that doesn't have that trope. But
listeners, if you've got one that's specifically inside of a fantasy book, tell us, and we will find a way to prove you wrong.
If we've read it,
I will personally read it and prove you wrong.
Harley will read it just so that she can prove you wrong.
We're Leos. What are we gonna do if not?
Yeah, I was like,
I'll go out of my way to make sure I'm right.
I have to be right. I can't help myself. Okay, so the third one, since we can't think of anything else that doesn't fall into that, I would say found family is actually very much the same. That's the third, I think, really big one that we see in just about every single fantasy story.
Yeah, I love that trope.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it.
I don't think I can think of a like fantasy book that doesn't have some aspect of found family in it. Especially like because most fantasy books have some sort of like epic quests or something, and you don't go on those alone, and you're gonna bond with the people that you go on the quest with.
Could you imagine going on the quest by yourself?
That sounds depressing.
I would
Wait.
quit.
Oh, I just remembered something sad.
I'll just be like, sorry, I'll let the world burn instead.
Drew,
I can't do this by
what did you realize, Drew?
Oh, it's Helen's series when one of the characters goes off on their own. And he's like, I'm just imagining, we don't get his perspective too much when he's off on his own, but I just thought about it. I was like, oh, he technically was out on a quest by himself. You know who I'm talking about, Harley?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, that just made my heart sad.
My poor sweet boy.
I know.
My poor sweet
man.
Yeah, I keep calling him a boy. He's like 500 years old. Just kidding, though. He's like 30.
I was like, wait. I was like, are we reading the same book?
Look, I just feel like the war swords are old because they're described as big, hulking, burly men. So they just sound... We're going to ignore the fact that I'm 30. They just sound like they should be much older than I. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. Like, I thought the older war swords who we weren't introduced to yet, I thought that they were a lot older, like Talamir. I thought he was like centuries old. I don't know why.
Well, do we know if they have like supernaturally long lives, or if they just get like normal human lives? Do we know? I don't know.
So I remember like that was like a point of contention in that series is like, can you ask for an extended life when you become a war sword?
Yeah.
And
True.
the whole thing was like, yeah, you can ask, but they like, are they gonna give it to you? So I think like they have slightly longer lives than regular humans just because they have like that power. But I don't think I don't think they could technically live like hundreds of years. That's the impression I'm under.
I was like, that's not a spoiler. Should I mention that we talk about that in my spoiler list.
We didn't say the book.
I'll bleep the author's name, and then no one will know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nancy.
Nancy won't
She didn't
remember.
know.
Nancy won't
It's
remember when she gets to it.
I will not.
Yeah, honestly,
remember.
nothing that Drew said was even really a spoiler for that series. Besides, we said the name of the warriors, and that's it.
And like you're probably not like you're probably gonna get to their name and be like, "Oh, cool! This is a new name I've never heard in my life before."
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bad memory, so
Perfect.
I probably won't remember.
Perfect.
Unless you give me a major spoiler.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, never. Just big spoilers only.
Yeah, if I know it's like a major spoiler, my brain will not let me forget it, but as long as it's vague, I will probably forget it by the time I get there.
Can we talk a little bit about genres that we read outside of fantasy? Because we all read at least one. Do you have a favorite trope in a non-fantasy genre?
I read a lot of dark romance. And so I love murdering someone who wronged you. Like gruesomely murdering someone who wronged you.
Drew, I have to tell you, so it's so funny because my other favorite fantasy is horror. That being said, I don't this is almost silly. I don't like dark romance because it feels a little too okay. I like dark romantic fantasy. I want the fantastic elements. Without the fantastic elements, it feels a little too close to real life for me.
Oh.
And that's fucking stupid for someone who loves horror.
I like horror too. I haven't read a lot of horror books recently, so it's like not fresh in my brain. But if you have any recs.
I will actually. So my book club right now is reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which is a Stephen King fantasy book. So I'm sure it's a fantasy horror book. I'm supposed to be like halfway through it by Sunday, and I haven't started it yet. So we'll see. But my favorite trope in a genre outside of fantasy is a horror specific trope, and it's when man, not like fuck men, like man, plural, all of us, is the actual horror of the story and not the entity or evil being or whatever.
Yeah.
And Stephen King does an incredible job of accomplishing this, like in every single book. I also never want to go to Maine because of his books.
I haven't read enough of his books to be afraid of Maine yet.
Okay, babe, every single one of his books takes place in Maine.
Oh, good to know.
Like his specific brand of horror is small town Maine.
That's suspicious. See, that's something's up with Maine.
Well, he writes. He's from Maine. He grew up in a small town in Maine, so he writes about the places that are familiar to him, and he's the king of horror for a reason. So, like for example, and this is not a spoiler because the book was published in like the 80s. It arguably one of his most famous books, right? The creature, for lack of a better word, is absolutely horrifying. That is the overarching villain of the story, but there are so many man-made horrific elements to that story that I'm not sure what is more horrifying. There is there is children who cut each other open with glass. There are children who murder other children. There are abusive adults abusing other adults and adults abusing children. There is a orgy scene between children.
Oh no.
There's a lot of atrocities against children specifically in that book, and those are the most horrifying elements in the books.
Okay, that's a good trope. That's a good fucked up trope.
And his other books are like that. Like The Shining is probably his other, or Pet Sematary are probably his 3 best known works. And in The Shining, it's the husband who does all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, maybe the hotel's haunted, maybe it's not. We don't actually know because he's hallucinating, but it's really about like the horrors of man. And he's very good at portraying that, I think.
I like that. Yeah, I like that trope. I think The only one I can think of with that has that sort of trope, I guess it's sort of horror, maybe it's more like dystopia, is Tender is the Flesh. Have you read that one?
No, tell me more.
It's about a society where there are designated humans who are the cattle.
Mm,
Yeah.
cool.
It's and I'll just leave it at that because that's all you really need to know, and it's so good, like, just there's a lot that happens, and then you get to the end and you're like, "Wait, what? What the fuck? Everything I thought I knew is upside down." So, I would add that to your list if you like a little bit of, it's kind
Okay.
of more gruesome than, like, scary horror, I would say.
There's a couple of fantasy books that have really good horror subplots in them. One is The Tidings of Misfits has, and A Waltz Through Flames, very specifically. They've got horror themes laced in throughout, and there's some genuinely, like, there's some shit, like, when I read it, I had to stop and be like, this is scary. Like, this
Oh.
is horrifying. What about you, Nancy?
Favorite trope in a genre outside of fantasy. I can't think of any right now cuz the main genre that I read outside of fantasy is contemporary romance, and since most of the fantasy I read also at the very least has like a romance subplot, like most of those tropes would also work in fantasy. And I am struggling to come up with one.
Well, that's actually, we can come back if you do, but that's a perfect segue into the very last topic that I had on our list for tonight.
Cool.
And it's what are some tropes that work in one genre but not in another? And the big one that I had sitting right there in front of my face is that Touch or Die doesn't work in like a contemporary romance setting. That's like restraining order, go to jail situations.
And that's why I read dark romance.
Yeah. What are some other examples that you guys think of, like maybe tropes that work really well in one genre but that like wouldn't translate very well?
Enemies to lovers is one that if I see that being used as marketing for a contemporary romance, I'm already like, no, it's not. But I think my definition of enemies to lovers might be more strict than like maybe some other people's, but you know, if they're not threatening to kill each other and actually mean it, they're not enemies.
I think
Yeah.
rivals to lovers is probably like what they use in contemporary normally, right?
I have seen like it marketed as seen contemporary romances marketed as enemies to lovers before, but it's actually, you know, rivals to lovers or mild annoyances to lovers or something like
Mild
that.
annoyance.
Not actually and not actually enemies. And like that is one of them. Like legit enemies to lovers doesn't work in contemporary romance settings.
What about you, Drew?
Try to think of one. I guess in dark romance and fantasy, like the possessive or like obsessive um romantic interest, like that trope doesn't really go over well with contemporary. Like you said, it's okay, like that's a restraining order or like that's a red flag. It's like, yeah, it's like once someone gets like possessive, too possessive, it's like, oh, that's a red flag in contemporary. But like as soon as you market it as dark romance, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm down. Red flags where?
Is there any, because I got nothing, but is there any you can think of that maybe don't fit as well in a genre that isn't contemporary romance? Like, okay, maybe like a one horse trope doesn't really go great in a horror book.
Yeah, or like a one horse and a sci-fi or like
Yeah.
I always forget about sci-fi.
I used to be super into sci-fi, and then just I don't know, one day I started reading one and I was like, "Wow, this is a lot of words that I" Oh, no, you know what it was? I got my biology degree and I was like, "I did enough of that. That's enough science for me," actually.
That's a lot of words. Too bad I'm not gonna read
Yeah, I was
them.
like, "You know what? I think I've had my fill of science, thank you very much." Mm, I feel like contemporary romance is the one that's, like, very it's like it's a box, like, you have certain things that are okay, but then other
Yeah.
genres, like, you can kind of filter out a lot of the tropes that we had mentioned, and it would work in those various genres.
Okay, well, before we go, let's go ahead and hop on over to our author corner. Nancy, who do you have for us tonight?
So I got an author that the three of us met through Tay's Discord, actually, Katrina Cappelli. And Katrina, just to read her about the author, little bio. Katrina has loved writing ever since she was in high school. After a long time of trying to find her path, she made her way back to writing and is now using her skills to craft romance novels. When she's not writing, she's spending time with her dog Pilot, reading, or watching the latest movies and TV shows. Katrina is also a big time Marvel nerd and loves the fantasy genre as well. And Katrina just released a book on May 2nd, so it was this past Thursday as we're recording this. Her book Midnight's just released, which is book 1 in her, I believe, contemporary romance series Time Won't Fly. It's contemporary romance with a time travel aspect. And here is the blurb. Ace Cosmo has spent every moment since she was 6 trying to impress her father. When she creates a time machine to deal with the loss of his wife, Ace reluctantly agrees to help him, thinking it will be the key to finally making him proud. Things get complicated when testing the time machine accidentally results in them bringing a man named Steve to the future from 1945. Ace and her father need to figure out why the time machine brought him here and send him back to his own time before it causes damage to the timeline. But what happens when Ace doesn't want to send him back? And what secrets is Steve keeping? So I have a copy. I won a copy of that book in one of Katrina's giveaways, and it is up next as soon as I finish Forever Rain. So I'm super excited for that
Well,
one.
that sounds super good. I'm super excited to look it up and give it a try. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And it's also like just 200 pages, so it's a super quick read as
love
well.
that.
Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. Follow us on Instagram at Bound and Book Podcast. My personal Instagram is at Undercover Faye.
You can find me over at HJK Reads. That's my initials. It's a fun time over there.
And you can find me at Nancy Reads and Writes on Instagram as well.
Thanks for reading with us, motherfuckers. Bye.
Bye.
I am